Hi everyone, my name is Akshay Gehlot. Welcome everyone to MetricStream GRC Summit 2020. Our next topic for today is operational risk management and resilience in times of COVID-19 and Africa perspective. I am pleased to introduce and welcome our guest speaker for this session, Ms. Adila Hashim. Adila currently serves as the Group Head of Operational Risk and Group Risk COO for Momentum Metropolitans Holdings Limited. In her role, she is responsible for group business continuity management, operational risk technology, which includes GRC, and the group's corporate insurance program. Adila has held a number of leadership and specialist roles over the years and brings in more than a decade and a half of experience across risk management, more specifically in insurance and financial services. Welcome, Adila.
Hello, Akshay, and everyone who's joined this webinar. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so moving along, so I think my first question to you today, Adila, is what are the key messages for GRC professionals in times of crisis?
Thank you, Akshay, for that question. I think, we can all agree that COVID-19 has impacted on everyone globally, all industries, all sectors, all people are feeling the impact of COVID-19. From a South African financial services perspective, I'm going to share a couple of key learnings that I've had over the last 6 to 8 weeks. In South Africa, we've been under lockdown for about 45 days now and counting. And we had to make lots of quick decisions over the period to enable our staff to continue. The one thing that I learned is that it's important to stay calm and don't panic. While everybody around you is anxious and uncertain about what the future holds, it is up to us as risk professionals to maintain that balance of not panicking and making sure that people can stay calm and we can make rational decisions. Empathy is extremely important as well, because people are feeling anxious. People are worried about losing their lives or their jobs or not being able to cope with this crisis. And so showing empathy for employees and clients and just people in general has been extremely important. I've realized also that in this crisis, we had to make some quick decisions. And we also had to then give up the notion of making perfect decisions. What that means is that as we made decisions and new information came to light, we had to be willing to undo those decisions or make different decisions so that we could continue operating. There was also an urgency for risk professionals in the South African context to take control and help make rational decisions. And for that, my suggestion to risk professionals is that we use risk appetite as an anchor for decision making. For years, we've been having processes and making sure that companies have risk appetite measures in place. This is an opportunity to establish whether those risk appetite measures are still appropriate, and then whatever decision we make, to use the risk appetite measures as a proxy for that decision. That helps us to eliminate rash decisions and short-term decisions.
Thank you, Adila. I think there were clearly a couple of different messages, including staying calm, don't panic. And I absolutely agree with you, the need to take quick decisions. Sometimes it's not easy to wait for the best decision. I think you have to just make a decision taking into consideration a finite set of variables and that's just moving along. So what should risk professionals be concerned about in terms of risks going forward?
It's a very good question, Akshay. Thank you very much. So this is an unknown crisis, and I think it's the first one I've seen in a very long time where every single type of risk has been impacted, whether it's financial risk or operational risk, clients, the market, the economy, credit risk, market risk, everything has been in turmoil. And what this crisis has highlighted is the interconnectedness of risks and sectors, because cross-sector risk transfer has happened in this process as well. Some companies have had to close up, other companies are thriving, such as those making protective personal equipment. There is a shifting risk focus, and I have picked that up in the 6 weeks, and also having attended a few webinars and spoken to some consultants. Key things that are emerging is health and safety risks. So employees, customers want to know that they're taken care of and that their health and safety is the first priority. Cyber risk. So as people work remotely and there's more access to endpoints, cyber risk is definitely on the increase. I have seen, more phishing attempts in South Africa, and I think that's the same globally. Fraud risk is also something to be aware of, because as people work remotely, there are more opportunities for fraud to take place, whether it's internal fraud or external fraud from customers and suppliers. And then lastly, conduct risk. So regulators are keenly watching how financial services industries manage the impact on the customer and how we are dealing with client relief measures during this crisis. A key learning I've also had is that we should take learnings from other sectors and regions. We're not in this alone, and we can learn from each other, and this is an opportunity for collaboration for the betterment of risk management and also survival. And lastly, in this evolving risk profile, the most important thing is to make sure that there's high engagement levels to keep everyone informed, whether that's employees, boards, or regulators or customers. If you don't keep people informed, people will lose interest and they will start doubting your ability as an organization to manage their needs as well as your own risk profile.
Right. No, absolutely. I think I quite agree with you that in this crisis, every single risk has been impacted, be it health and safety. There are new risks emerging, be it cybersecurity risks. And absolutely, as you rightly said, there is a need to keep the people informed. I think communication is key so that people are not panicking and they are able to adapt to the new normal. Moving along, how have risk and control environment evolved during the crisis? What's your view here, Adila?
So actually, leading on from the evolving risk profile, I think the work environment has changed forever. We've now seen that across multiple sectors, especially in financial services, that remote work is possible. And, the question that I ask is this the new normal? Because there's no way that we can go back to, asking people to all be in one location or in one office when we've had a good test of remote working capabilities over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And there's an element of, companies making sure that they trust their employees and that they use this opportunity for remote work to look at what savings they can achieve. So having less office space, lower utilities. Actually, remote work is also good for sustainability and the environment, because we have seen that with less travel, people are more productive and there's less emissions in the environment. The shift from office work to remote work happened in a very short space of time in my company. So we had 3 days between when the government announced a lockdown and when the lockdown took effect. And in those 3 days, we equipped 11,000 people to work remotely. And a key point there is about being flexible in terms of working arrangements, because this lockdown has meant that lots of people are having challenges with their spouses also working from home, their kids not being able to go to school, and extended family requirements. Remote working infrastructure, employee morale and engagement are key focus points for the evolving work and control environment. We've seen people get frustrated if the bandwidth isn't good enough or they're taking too long to get work done. And morale and engagement in a remote environment is quite important. If we are unable to keep our staff motivated and productive, then we will start introducing new risks into the environment, where controls will break down, people will make mistakes, people will not have the same due care that they had when they were in an office. Key for this, for an evolving work and control environment, is that there's definitely different leadership skills needed to manage remote teams. As I said, you need to be able to trust people, but you need to also be able to focus on productivity and still maintain your control environment. This is where, automated controls monitoring comes into play, because the more that you can automate in terms of monitoring, the less you have to worry about your control environment going wrong.
Right. No, absolutely. I quite agree with you. Of course, this is the new normal, and most of us are beginning to work from home much more effectively and efficiently as much as we were about a couple of weeks back, right? And I also personally quite agree that it definitely does enhance to your productivity levels. You're not spending the same time driving to work. Of course, much more sustainable from an environment standpoint. I think you touched upon a interesting point around automating the control environment, right? If I may ask, what is the role of GRC solutions in enabling businesses to be more resilient? Like if I were to bring a GRC angle to it, like what's your perspective here?
So actually, I think if I can step back a bit, and then I'll answer the question about, the role of automation and technology, is that in this new world, risk management is going to look different. And it's important that we find prioritize key risks based on exposure and impact we have, and make sure that we've got new tools that we can use. So scenario and stress testing to understand how these risks that we've identified will play out, and have parameters that are relevant to the business. It's also important to identify key actions and trigger points for action. So when something happens, having a list of key actions that you can take if that scenario plays out helps with the risk appetite decision-making process, but also takes away that subjectivity in decision-making. And then finally, that understanding what the business can do to minimize the impact of the crisis. So whether that is, having different spatial and regional approaches, implementing new measures to protect office environments, reviewing business models and products. And then the point of digitization comes in, because for risk management, and I always say, we've always said it as a risk professional community, never waste a good crisis. So there's an opportunity here to look at bringing in automation, bringing in new tools and technology to enable the business to be resilient and to weather future crises. So some of the key things that I've also picked up is that when we exploit a crisis, we need to look for opportunities to digitize engagement, to upskill and train staff to think about things differently, figuring out what risk processes make sense in this new way of work and which ones can you automate. So an example of an automation that I'm thinking of is traditionally risk managers do quite a lot of risk control self-assessments, and this is where GRC tools become really important. But what if you could actually program a bot to do that risk control self-assessment without human intervention? So there's lots of opportunities that we need to go and look at, and GRC technologies form a baseline of what we need, because that automates our processes and helps us to understand what we need to do. And once you've got a technology in place, you can then start thinking about, well, how do I take this to the next level, and how do I bring in true digitization?
No, absolutely. I think you did touch upon quite a number of, I would say, pointers here, like be it areas like artificial intelligence, be it bringing in robotic process automation using bots, etc. Right. I personally liked that observation that never waste a good crisis. Right. So I think, and as much as the focus is to continuously keep improving the processes as you're getting ready for the future, I feel that many a times the biggest struggle is how do you get the buy-in internally? So that brings me to my next
Mm,
question. How should risk
mm,
professionals go about ensuring that risk processes evolve for the future and you have
mm,
continued buy-in for GRC?
mm. So actually, good points that you've raised there, because the reality is that when there's a crisis as well, we've seen in the past that funding gets rediverted from risk management to other initiatives in the organization. I, however, think that this crisis is quite different. So this crisis has actually highlighted the need for good operational risk and business continuity processes, which are key components of a GRC program. And I really believe that GRC professionals right now could demonstrate what their value add is and how a GRC technology, such as Mixed Extreme, could help them to respond faster to a crisis. So like I said, there is a need to look for opportunities to digitize engagement and risk processes. And I believe that GRC systems are the foundation of that digitization, because we can't be doing things manually or keeping hordes of Excel documents or Word documents listing business continuity plans or risk assessments or control assessments. There is this need for understanding the difference between the short-term disruptions that the risk professional will face and understand what the long-term impacts will be. And, you know, putting forward a business case for GRC right now is about future-proofing for the future. Understanding that if we don't digitize now, next time we have a crisis, it's going to take us just as long to respond as it did now. I mean, I'm left with this thought of considering what has changed and imagining what the new normal will be for an organization. I cannot imagine that we wouldn't have more digitization, more automation, and then using new technologies such as machine learning or robotics and analytical tools to monitor, key risk indicators and control failures. Now is the time for risk professionals to really look at their processes and say, but what do I need and how am I going to take this forward in this new normal that we have?
Right. No, absolutely. I think one of the key takeaways is obviously to make sure that as much as automation is key, while you're refining the processes, how do you as an organization is better prepared for the future? So that next time,
Mm,
if a crisis like this happens, we are able to deal with it more effectively and more efficiently. And absolutely, I
mm,
quite agree with you on the same, Adila. Well, I think that's all which I wanted to talk to you today, Adila. Thank you so much for your time. I personally enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure the audience
mm.
would find a lot of value in the session, and hopefully they have a few key messages to take away as well as they deal with risk management and resilience in these extraordinary
Mm.
times. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you very much, Akshay. And my last closing comments is just remember, stay calm, because right now that is actually what most organizations need. A level-headed business partner in risk management that can help them to navigate decisions and weather the storm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adila. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.